Right, I hope you can hear me okay. Still struggling on with my tiny little Microsoft webcam, but hopefully it's going to be good enough for this demonstration. Now recently I asked my email subscriber list what particular areas of painting that they struggled with, what would they like to practice, what would they like to get better at. Quite a few people got back to me, and a couple of people asked for exercises to help them with practicing judging of value. So in order to help with that, I've developed 3 basic exercises. This is the first of the 3. What these exercises represent is a very specific way to practice. So we're taking one specific area of painting, value, specifically judging value. And this exercise, this first exercise, is meant to be repeated as often as you feel you need to do it, every day, for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, until you feel that you're getting better at judging value. Now this is a very, very simple exercise, and it's supposed to be very simple. Just to start off with, my materials list. Now this here is a sheet of a canvas pad, very useful, nice surface to paint on, quite cheap, good for studies. Okay, I've got titanium white paint here, ivory black paint, trusty palette knife for mixing with. It's a glass easel, small amount of turp should I need it, and I've got a few different brushes here. Now this is the first brush I used today. This is a flat, which is good for scrubbing in flat areas of colour. Actually it's a bright, it's not a flat at all. I just told you a little lie. Very short bristles, very stubby, can take a lot of banging and abuse and it's still fine. So I've mixed up a very light grey for my background, and then I have 5 brushes. Now the reason I've got 5 brushes is because I want to keep a separate one as near as possible for each value. You can see in this top row I've got 3 values. I've already put black, white, and I'm going to mix an optical grey, what I think is about the middle between those two here, and then I'm going to transfer it down to here. I've got my black, I've got my white, and then I'm going to mix a step between those, and then here I'm going to mix a step between each of those, by which time I end up with a 9-step scale. Now you could use a Munsell scale for this, which is fine, of course, I mean very, very useful. However, I think there's a lot of value in training your eye to practice judging value, and this I think is where we start. So the first thing I need to do is try to mix up a value which I think is midway between these two. So I'll take some of mine, probably don't need that much, titanium white, smaller amount of black. Mix those together and see how we go. Now I'd recommend doing this exercise every day for a week, as I said earlier. General idea being that you repeat the practice. Now the way we learn is that we make connections between neurons in our brain. The more often information travels down these neurons, the connections that we make between these neurons, the stronger the connections get. And we should find fairly quickly, one, that we get into a habit if we do this every day, which is why we start with a very simple exercise, to get into the habit. And 2, that the knowledge passes into our unconscious, our subconscious. We get a feel for value over time. And we become better at this simply through repeating some very simple exercises, until we get to the point where what we've learned, the knowledge we've gained, the new collections and connections between our neurons, the new patterns of neurons that we've formed, mean that we can do this without having to think about it. Now I'm still looking for something which I think is probably optically somewhere between these two. I think I'm probably getting fairly close now. Now I think you shouldn't sweat this too much. This is the first time I'm doing this. I'm going to do this exercise depending on how long this takes me. As long as it takes me less than an hour, I'm going to do this exercise with each of these value scales every day for a week. Right, I'm going to commit to spending that time, and then we'll see if my finished value scales are better than my starting value scales. Now I must be honest, anyone who's read my blog for any length of time knows that I've spent a huge amount of time practicing values, so I'll be really disappointed if I don't get something reasonably good on my first attempt. Okay, so here's my brush for my black, here's my brush for my white, new brush for my mid-grey. I think this is something like halfway between those 2 points. So let's bang it in. Now, I'm not too worried about this being perfect. The point is the practice that I get in. Judging values. See, already I'm judging now. My brain, all my little neurons, my brain, starting to talk to each other, making connections. I'm making connections, well, I'm strengthening probably connections I already have to do with laying down paint. I'm also strengthening the connections that I have for judging value. Value, in my opinion, is never absolute. It's always relative. So we should be looking for exercises. If we want to get better at using value, we should be looking for exercises which stretch our ability to judge one value against another. Relative values. I think that's probably a little on the light side, but I'm going to go with it anyway. And maybe when I start my week of doing this every day, maybe my first one will be a little bit darker, and maybe I'll get a little bit closer, and I'm going to really know when I get down here. I suspect I'm going to really know whether I'm in the middle or not, because if I'm too far over to one side of the value scale with this value, if it's too dark or if it's too light, like as not I'm going to have trouble squeezing in my intermediate steps further down. This is my mid-grey. In Munsell terms, we'd be talking about this as a value 5. Is it a value 5? I haven't a clue. Maybe I'll get my chips out later and check. But personally I'm moving away from using externally produced scales because I feel that it's more beneficial to make your own, because it develops your own ability to judge values, and it somehow feels more organic. Okay, it's my mid-grey. So my next job is I want to mix something optically between the mid-grey I've got here and the black. So I'll get some more white out. Not too much white this time. Probably more than I think I'll need though. Big wodge black. I guess that's about 50-50. Maybe a bit more. And that's plainly about the same as the one I already had, so I'll just take a little bit of that and wipe your palette knife every time you pick up some paint from your paint pal. keep your paint piles clean. This is good practice for any time you're painting and mixing colours. That's still light. That still looks to me like it's towards the middle, more towards the mid-grey. I need some more black. This is Michael Harding's paint. Really nice quality on paint, not cheap. But lovely, lovely consistency. Brushes come from Cornelison's in London, just off Tottenham Court Road. Wonderful brushes, again, not expensive. Hog, hair, Chinese pig. What do you think? Maybe, actually that looks like it might be too dark. Mind. Bit more lighter grey, and then I'm just going to bang it in. As I say, I'm not going to sweat too much at this point, but this is my first one. No, I'm not going to get everything right. When I do the next one, I'll have this one with me so that I can see. Look. See what I think I've got right, what looks nice and balanced, what looks like an unbalanced step, and try and correct it on the next iteration of the exercise. Slap it on nice and thick, not messing about. Not too bad actually. Looks like it might be a little bit towards black, and of course in this scale it's going to go in here, so that when I come to my bottom scale I mix one either side. Alright.